schools here in my kids' school district, starting next week, Wednesday, all kids are going to be in school at the same time. Same with the week after that. And then supposedly starting on the 28th of September, it's all kids in school all the time. Which I'm like, oh, that feels very different. Is that the sense that is being discussed at Aquinas that you guys are seeing from other profs? Like we'll switch to in-person in a few weeks? Grace, you're shaking your head no?
No, as far as I'm concerned, we're stuck on the plan of like, if you have virtual classes, then you're stuck doing virtual classes. And if you have in-person class, then you have in-person class, because the teachers already have things set up where if you're virtual, you're virtual. If you're in person, you're in person. But if you're one of those students who like went to register and got like only virtual classes,
Yes.
then that's fine. But especially if you're an athlete, you have to have at least one in-person class. So it's like, it depends on like if your teachers, like all classes are in person for the most part, but some of them like either you have an option. That's better. Simply
Okay.
put, you got an option.
Okay. And what about athletics? What is that looking like? Are sports actually starting now?
Yeah, so we're started, but we're like in groups, and we start in different time frames. So it's like only like a certain amount of us in one group. So it's like 7 girls in A group, and then 7 girls in B group, and the same thing with boys. So we split up by boy girl, and then in A and B group at different time slots.
How will
Yeah,
that work?
softball's the same way too. We're split into 3 different groups. We can only practice with the same like 9 people.
Ah. Now, what's the game plan once there's a game or a meet?
I don't know.
Anything.
Too advanced. I have no clue.
Yeah.
Well, and I asked because, so my son plays flag football. He's 10, and we didn't register him this year because it didn't seem like it was going to happen. Now they're like, yay, football, register. And I'm like, what? How? What? And they're like, well, it's, minimal tackling. And I'm like, I don't like the tackle, period. And now on top of that, like these boys in each other's faces with like like they squirt each other with their water bottles. And like, this just the stuff, a nightmare. I'm like, nope. We're a family of 6, and only 2 of us would be able to go and spectate and be there. So, which I don't know, maybe it'd work out because then I wouldn't have to see the stuff that would give me nightmares later on. But I don't know, all the things. Weird world we're living in, that's for sure. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the literature review that you guys will be writing. For a lot of you, this may be the first time that you do something like this. And so I just want to be clear from the get-go so we're all on the same page. The idea behind a literature review, well, is exactly in the title. You are reviewing the literature. However, it is not a book report, something you may have done in literature classes where you're saying, in this study, they decided to have 100 participants, they found this, and this is their results. And then in this study, they right? Like that would be almost more of an annotated bibliography where you're taking each of your references and coming up with a small summary for each. The idea behind a literature review is that you select a topic and then you look through the literature to see what are the seminal researchers, what do they have to say about this topic? Read those articles more than just the abstract, and then find what are the common denominators between them, either in methodology, either in the results that they received, either in the participants they selected, like what do they have in common, and then clump them together, synthesize the research, and speak eloquently on it. So I'm going to use an example as we dive through this to kind of give you guys a framework for it. And then I have a couple websites that I'll point you in the right direction so that you can kind of use that as your guide. If I'm interested, and I think maybe I used this example before, but if I'm interested in finding out what is most predictive of college success in the first year of college, I might be looking at literature that first identifies what is academic success, right? I need to quantify and really define my terms. So what is academic success? So I would look at different research, and let's say it says good grades is one of them, social connectedness is another one, retention, right? Like enrolling for a second year. That would be another measure of success right there, staying. So those would be, by reading the studies, what would bubble up is what's in common. So you start categorizing. And then what's predictive of success, then taking it a step further, would be how do we measure that and how do we predict for it? So perhaps in the literature, there's something that says past academic success is the best predictor of future success. So something about study skills, having strong study skills that were established in high school are going to be a predictor of college success. Past GPA. So, right, academic performance, which that might tie into study skills a little bit, academic performance will remain into college. Maybe you look at standardized testing. That standardized testing, there's going to be lots of studies that say those are most predictive of college success because it's tapping into a student's ability to really work through stress, their ability to study on certain vocab, abstract thinking, and all that, and that's most predictive of college success. Maybe you look at involvement in extracurricular activity, which shows that the student is multifaceted and is able to adapt to multiple environments. So again, I'm throwing all of these as ideas, but if you were to search into a database and type in college academic success, you would get a ton of research papers that would come up on that. And then you would need to sift through what are your hypotheses as to what's most important, find articles that support that idea, right? And then read them and see what do they have in common. Do they line up perfectly as to what they say in terms of that particular idea? And then in that, the way you would structure it is in the paragraph where you discuss, let's say, standardized testing as most predictive. If you had 3 articles that you selected that all said, yes, standardized testing is most predictive because of all this past research we've done, and we know they're created well, whatever. Then under the heading of standardized testing as a predictor of college success, you would bring in those 3 articles and what they had in common. So it'd be something like, in Smith and al, and in Suarez and al, both studies supported that the SAT had the greatest predictor of college success. And then in parentheses, you'd have their full in-text citation. And then you'd continue on. In both studies, students who scored at an SAT score of 1,300, is it not at a 16, whatever the measure is. Let's say it's at a 1,600 in the old days, that's what it was. Students who scored at 1,300 or higher were significantly more likely to receive A's in their first year of college and matriculate to their next year. You'd write that information in. So that would be one of the factors. Maybe another factor, you're talking about past academic performance. So you'd find studies that would support that academic performance is really stable throughout one's high school career, unless there's trauma, whatever. You'd find those articles, that would be your heading, past academic success, and then you would find articles that would support that. Again, think of a literature review as really, you're telling a story on that particular topic. So if the topic is what is predictive of college success, then I need to look at all facets that might show that it's predictive. And I can't just find one article. Well, Joe Blow says that if you really like Kraft macaroni and cheese, you're going to be an excellent freshman in college. No one cares about Joe Schmo, right? Like, you need something that is empirically supported and that fellow researchers have agreed on it. Okay, so that's how you're going to combine your document. My brain thinks in bullet points and subheadings, so that's an easy transition for me. That's not the case for everybody else. So when you guys are creating a framework for your literature review, it's a good idea to have an outline. And at the top, you're going to have whatever your topic is. Now, does one of you want to give me an example of your topic? Anybody feeling brave wants to share, and then we can use that as an example? Go ahead, Izzy.
I know the group I'm in with Grace Sweet, ours is birth order and personality traits.
Okay, so then with that, we'd want to look at the research on, so that would be your heading, right? Like your title. You probably have an actual question in there somehow. So like, I'm going to throw stuff out. and don't get offended, right? So firstborn, more likely to show traits of assertiveness. Making stuff up here. Does birth order theory support that the youngest children of a family are spoiled and more emotionally unstable? Again, totally making stuff up. Okay, but I love that Leah's like, heck yeah, no. Birth order theory, is the middle child syndrome a thing, or are they just whiners? Oh, Darshana, yep, Darshana's totally on it. Okay, so you want to have a question. What is it you're wanting to know? And from there, you need to dissect what's in the literature. So you want to look, so birth order, there's tons out there. So what does birth order theory tell you? And based on your original question, you're going to focus on that. If you're interested in the oldest, the youngest, the middle child, some tendency of, within that, whatever that looks like. And then you're going to want to break that up under the birth order theory. And then in terms of personality theory, if you're picking assertive, if you're picking more dramatic, whatever it is within that, you want to look at theories of that. What does that behavior look like? How is it defined? How is it exhibited? And then you then at the end want to link it together. The way we link it together is with our hypothesis, which will state something like, in a study of 100 individuals selected by the experimenter or the researcher, and then you insert the thing. So oldest children of a family will show greater signs of assertiveness than youngest children of a family. Or single children, right, who don't have siblings, show greater signs of independence than youngest children in a multiple family. Again, I'm totally making stuff up, but you see how you're going to take the theory of birth order, talk about those factors within that. What are some of the seminal research studies that support your idea, whatever it is, firstborn, lastborn, middleborn, and then whatever personality factor that you think is linked, find those articles that support that. And then at the very end, you link them together with your hypothesis. Your hypothesis does not need to be longer than one sentence, and I would like it to be labeled under hypothesis. So literally write hypothesis as a subheading, underline, whatever, one sentence. Okay, questions about all that so far? This is not a one and done. We'll talk about this multiple times. Yeah, go ahead, Grace.
Are we developing our hypothesis based on what we find in our research?
So yes, you could do it that way, or
like our actual asking people type of research, not like our literary research.
okay, so no. So we need to have, as researchers, we want to be objective, right? So we're going to go to the research, past research. We're going to write a literature review and become like experts on it. I mean, semi-experts, because this is like a very short class. But you read them, then you know, hey, this is the scoop. This is what I'm finding out. And because of what I've read, here's my hypothesis. Now I'm gonna find a document, or a survey or questionnaire that taps into this very thing. I'm gonna pass it out to people, and I'm gonna see if my data supports or refutes my hypothesis. So you need to come up with your hypothesis before you gather any data, because otherwise that could fall under the falsification of data, right? Because you could say, well, I don't know. I think there's a relationship. I'm not sure what it is. I'm going to get the data, and then I'm going to go back and write, yeah, that's what I thought, right? So we want to stay ethical with that. So we look to the previous research first, get educated on it, write up our literature review, come up with our hypothesis, and then we do the research. Does that kind of answer your question, or did I misunderstand? Okay. Other questions about that?
Yeah, so just to be clear, you just said so you make your hypothesis before you do the research and everything. So your hypothesis doesn't seem like you're going based off what you read already, right?
No, your hypothesis is based on what you read,
Right.
but it's not based on the data you'll gather.
Okay.
So if let's say I'm gonna make something up, that's gonna be fun. I'm gonna say, I'm curious to see if Starbucks employees wash their hands while they work. And I'm gonna sit at Starbucks and I'm gonna observe what they're gonna do. And I'm not gonna really say what I think is gonna happen. I'm just gonna see. And then I'm gonna actually see the data that 95% of them didn't wash their hands. And now I'm gonna say, oh no, past studies had already informed me they weren't gonna wash their hands. I'm letting the data inform my hypothesis rather than letting past research, good empirically sound research, inform my hypothesis to then get the data. So we want to do it in this order, not reverse order. That makes sense. Okay. Okay. So this, where are we? I think it's right here. This I thought was a pretty good article. Can you guys see writing your literature review? No? Yes? Okay. I'm gonna type that in. This is from USC actually, but this is the section here that I thought would be most important. This is a large document, but when you're writing your literature review, first you want to settle on how you're going to organize it, which my suggestion is to organize it by subheadings found in the research studies that you uncover, right, during your literature search. You're going to make sure to use evidence, right? That's obvious. We want to make sure to cite the study and multiple studies, right? If multiple studies are supporting the fact that the oldest children show signs of leadership more than younger siblings, I want to cite that research, right? So that can be within an in-text citation. I can talk about and synthesize the research I've read between multiple sources and then make sure to cite it afterwards. So you want to make sure to use that. And you, again, make sure that you have good in-text citation. And I'm going to skip here. Use quotes very sparingly. This drives me personally bananas when I see students who go, as seen in a study done by James and Wu, quote, and they just totally regurgitate another researcher's discussion. That just shows me that you know how to hit copy and paste. That's not showing anything to me about your critical thinking. So you need to go through, look at the research and synthesize it between multiple resources. You guys are smart. You know what you're doing. Trust yourself in that. So make claims based on what the study is stating, but be able to put them together and actually integrate them together. Okay, so let's use evidence. Be selective. I do not need a full report on every study you read. That's not what this is about, right? I am not verifying whether you read the study. That is not the point of this. The point of this is to look at different research articles, find what is most important that is going to support your point of view and your hypothesis so that you can deploy this research feeling solid that you know what's going on. So make sure that you're just hitting the highlights. Make sure that it all relates directly to your research problem. This is a big pitfall that I see a lot of students in. They just give me so much data. I'm like, we're way out here discussing, so with birth order, for instance, we're way out here talking about how they'll parent as their own children in the future. Like that's interesting, but that has nothing to do with personality traits within their own birth order and their family of origin, right? So we need to parse out and push out distractors. Even though they may be interesting, we got to focus on what is our research question. Okay, so use quotes. I've already said that. Make sure that you're just summarizing and synthesizing what is most important, and make sure to stay within the themes and subheadings of your paper. And make sure you keep your own voice. So you guys, I want to know what you think. I want to know your opinion and how you're understanding the research. So make sure that it's coming from you and not all of these other researchers. So you want to make sure to keep your own voice. And be careful when you're paraphrasing. Again, you want to make sure to use your own voice. You're not totally copying and pasting what someone else wrote. But make sure that you're representing the author's point accurately. So that if somebody was going back, I mean, we've talked about this before, right? We see it on social media all the time, like, drinking 7 cups of coffee makes you smarter. And you're like, well, I went back and looked at the original source. That is not what they meant at all. They were simply stating that somebody who is smart can have as much coffee as they want as someone, right? Like, don't misunderstand and skew it in a certain way that's going to be somehow falsifying it too. Okay. This I thought was, okay. This is huge. And I think we've talked about this before. Do not be afraid to point out pitfalls by past researchers. That is A-okay. So if somebody in the past research is telling you slam dunk, yep, shows leadership skill, and they only gave a very short assessments of leadership that wasn't really discerning between firstborn or secondborn, it's okay to write that. It's okay to also just dismiss that article altogether if you're like, yeah, that's crummy research. But if you want to keep it in, it's okay to be like, you know, they found this evidence. However, one should be concerned or should be aware that there was a limited sample size, or that the study or instrument that was utilized to measure assertiveness was in fact quite short and perhaps not a valid measure of assertiveness as a whole. So it is A-okay to look at the research critically and not just take whatever they give you as like, you know, unrefutable truth. It's okay for you guys to be critical of it. Lastly, do not necessarily push out any data that is maybe going against what you thought it was. Instead, look at it and see if that's maybe something you might experience as well. Let that inform your research too. So for the literature review, we're just really looking to synthesize, get an idea. Again, make sure you have an outline so you know where your subheadings are, see where you're gonna plug in different studies, how you're gonna have them mixed together, and make sure to have a sound hypothesis that you're gonna write. That is the goal of the literature review. Questions about that? That's a lot of information I just threw at you, and it's like 8 o'clock. So, you know, we're at our best mentally right now. This is not a once opportunity. Obviously, you guys can reach out to me at any time. Many of you, we need to make sure to wrap up our topics first off. That's step one. But once you start looking at research article, which I recommend you start doing now, make sure you're keeping that in mind. So I need to send this out to you guys. I'm gonna need to add that to our class website. Let me do that right now, because otherwise I'm gonna forget. And I think it was right here. And I'm just gonna call it a lesson. Sure, I'm just gonna do that. Do you guys know how to write a reference page using APA format? I'm gonna need yeses or no because I can't see you guys.
Yes.
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 Okay. Okay. If you have any questions about that, the APA style book, and I think I've talked about, like, I am not gonna lose sleep over, oh, is it APA 7? You know, it's fine. That hasn't changed a whole lot, but make sure that it is formatted correctly, because that is coming up. I think you guys need to submit your references. It's just in a couple weeks. Sorry, I'm pulling up our syllabus here. I want to make sure that I've got that correct. So so next week, your research topics are due. And then your reference section is not due till October 14th, but that feels like it's coming soon. So, okay. Questions about any of that?
Okay, I kind of have a question.
Yeah.
So the research part of it that is due, that's like just the things that we, or I guess, look at regarding our topic, is like that, like back up what we're trying to get across.
Yes.
Okay.
Think
Cool.
that you're like an attorney heading into a courtroom,
Okay.
and you need to present your case. And this is opening arguments. Opening arguments are going to and you know, I'm not an attorney, so maybe I shouldn't be using that example, but from all the law movies I've seen and TV show, right? Like, they have built a case and they're able to bring back past legal cases that support what should be done with their defendant or how they're prosecuting. You're doing the same thing. What has been done in the past that shows that this is a topic that is significant, that has a connection to, because right, we have two variables we're kind of dealing with. And then that'll lead you kind of like a story, so that as a reader, AKA me, when I'm reading your paper and I get to your hypothesis, I'm like, oh, yeah, that totally comes together because you laid out the whole point for it on both angles. And then you tell me your hypothesis, then you guys as a group, because each of you are individually writing your paper, but as a group of 4, you will gather data together. So each of you, let's say you're finding 20 people, then all of a sudden you have a sample size of 80. That's a lot better. And then the analysis of the surveys and all that, that'll be done as a group. Everybody, I mean, stats doesn't change from one person. It should not change from one person to another. And so then we'll get the stats put together with a table, and then you will each be in charge of coming up with your own conclusion and discussion sections. Okay. Any other questions about that? Kind of making sense? Yes.
So everything we just went over for the like literary responses and everything, is that something we do as a group, or do we each individually turn one in?
Individually, you each turn one in.
Okay.
The only thing that'll be the same across all group members will be the results section, which is the stats. Yeah. Okay. If there are no more questions, I just looked at my calendar. I'm like, I got that wrong. It's not the 16th, it's the 17th. No, all day I've been writing we're the 10th. So that's where my problem is. No, we are meeting next week on the 16th. Call me, text me if you guys have any questions in the meantime. Make sure that you have your topics due by then so we can discuss them as a group as well. Was there a question? Yeah, go ahead, please.
So for when we, like the October date, when we turn in our references, are we like turning in our references and like summarizing them and why we're using them type of thing?
No. It'll just literally be a reference
Literally be like the
page.
reference page that we put at the end of the
Yes.
paper. Okay.
Yeah, and then the following week, you'll be turning in your whole introductions. And then after that, we'll turn in methods. We're just like going through it step by step.
Okay.
Okay? Okay. All right. All right. You guys have a great night, and we'll see each other next week. All right. Bye, guys.